The chaos surrounding his death really hurts my heart.
It was absolutely our worst nightmare.
Sadness, frustration.
Right now he's kind of violent.
18 days ago, we learned something is broken with conditional release.
Adam Cooley had a job he loved. He didn't want fame and fortune. He wanted to be happy, and being a bouncer made him happy.
And he was loved there.
He worked security at the Great Alaskan Bush Company strip club on Grand Avenue.
He wasn't the guy that threw people to the ground. He was never that. He was just this calm person, and he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
The day after Christmas, 2010, Adam had just switched to cover the door and didn't know a threat remained inside. A man named Gavin Macfarlane was inside the club. He went to the parking lot, got a gun from his car, and started shooting. McFarland shot 4 people, killing 2, including Adam.
Other patrons were able to wrestle him to the ground and hold him to the police till the police officers arrived.
He was sweet, nice to everyone, and it's unfortunate that, it ended up this way.
I don't really like to think about that because he was so quiet, and the chaos surrounding his death really hurts my heart because he didn't live his life in chaos.
McFarland later told police he wanted to see if he had what it took to kill people. He had no other reason. Court documents show McFarland had a history of mental illness. At some point during his court case, he pleaded guilty except insane. He would not go to jail.
Sadness, frustration. I remember when the prosecutor was trying to explain that he was going to be GEI, and I just started, that's when I broke down, I think, the hardest over this whole entire case.
Instead of prison, McFarland was sentenced to 25 to life in the Arizona State Hospital, and Adam's family thought that was where he would stay forever, until they learned that life doesn't always mean life, and there's a way some people convicted of violent crimes could get out early.
On April 12, 2021, 18 days ago, we learned something is broken with conditional release, and this board needs to re-examine what proof is being presented to them, because Mr. Howell is dead and someone on conditional release is facing a new murder charge.
Sir, we have a connection. Where are you at? 3583 East Wild Horse? Okay, what's going on there?
One of our clients just grew out this morning as I attacked the staff. We are outside of the house.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time understanding you. What did he do? Or what's his name?
Lambeth. Christopher Lambeth.
How is he going to react to my officers? Is he going to be cooperative with my officers? Is he going to be hostile towards my officers?
Actually, I don't know, because right now he's kind of violent.
April 12th, 2021. Christopher Lambeth was arrested at a group home. Police say he had beaten a man to death. They found him inside the group home where he'd been living, apparently washing off the victim's blood in the shower. And it wasn't the first time Lambeth had been arrested for murder.
He killed somebody that was in the year 2005.
Lambeth killed his grandparents in Tucson in 2005. His lawyer said he was hallucinating, going through a psychotic break, and was schizophrenic. He also pleaded guilty except insane, and was given 25 to life in the state hospital. So how could he be in a group home only 14 years later?
Go ahead and start today's Psychiatric Security Board meeting.
This is the board that voted to let Lambeth out. The Psychiatric Security Review Board is the final word on what happens to people found guilty except insane in the state hospital. They listen to recommendations from the hospital and determine if a patient is well enough to get released. Arizona is one of only 3 states that has a PSRB: Arizona, Oregon, and Connecticut. The 5 board members are appointed. Currently, 3 are mental health professionals, 1 is a lawyer, and 1 works in parole and probation. Their decisions are final, and they're independent of any other state agency, meaning they have no oversight.
None.
Attorney Holly Giesel represents people at the state hospital under the control of the PSRB. Those numbers show the PSRB supervises 113 people. According to the most recent annual report, 97 of them are in the Arizona State Hospital, and 32 are on some sort of conditional release, anything from short field trips outside the hospital to living on their own. And of those 113 people, 54 were convicted of murder, like Lambeth. Giesel remembers Lambeth's case. She says it stuck out.
It caught my eye immediately because there was no risk assessment. And there was no report from a psychiatrist, no report from a psychologist, no testing. It was pretty rote. The whole proceeding lasted less than 20 minutes. And you're making the biggest step possible.
And Lambeth's isn't the only case we found with problems. Kenneth Wakefield stabbed his mother in the neck, chest, and throat. It was March 2003. Wakefield was charged with attempted second-degree murder. He was found guilty except insane and sentenced to 10.5 years in the Arizona State Hospital. In 2014, Wakefield's doctors told the PSRB he was ready to be released. He was no longer mentally ill. Wakefield also met his wife, Karen Heisch, in the state hospital. She was also released by the PSRB. 2 months after releasing Wakefield, the board changed its mind and told the county attorney's office to start the civil commitment process. They did, but he wasn't committed, not before he stabbed and decapitated his wife and 2 dogs.
Absolutely a horrific scene out here. Apparently self-amputated his left arm just below the elbow. He was also missing his left eye. It was completely out of socket.
Wakefield is now serving 29 years in prison, not the state hospital. Isaac Benelli was arrested in 2002 for shooting at police in Tucson. He also pled guilty except insane and got 15 years in the state hospital. But after 11 years, the PSRB voted to let Benelli out, unconditionally. 3 months later, Benelli was arrested after crashing his car with 2 loaded guns. He was suspected of stealing more guns from a Walmart and driving to a Border Patrol station in Casa Grande, claiming to be sent on secret orders from the Department of Homeland Security. He was arrested again, sentenced to 3 years in prison. It wasn't until after he was released from prison that the PSRB ordered him back to the hospital. A few months later, the board voted to let him go for good. Emily Miles saw Christopher Lambeth's arrest on the news.
It was absolutely our worst nightmare. I read that and I went, oh my gosh, this is what we're dealing with.
Just a few weeks after Lambeth's arrest, the hospital applied to give Gavin Macfarlane some freedoms. The first in a long line of steps that could eventually end with McFarland living unsupervised, released from the state hospital.
This level of conditional release is supported by the hospital director, and the hospital medical director. We are asking the board to grant that request at this time and allow Mr. McFarland the staff supervised passage into the community.
Conditional release. McFarland would be supervised on small outings from the hospital and fitted with an ankle monitor. It's the first step toward eventual release into the community, as long as the hospital staff say McFarland is not a danger and his mental illness is in stable remission.
We were under the impression that he would serve a life sentence, if not behind bars, then safely behind the walls of Ash.
Adam Cooley's family was furious.
He is dangerous. His crimes escalated to murdering 2 people. He was sentenced under ARS 13704, the Dangerous Offender Sentencing Statute. Judge Stevens said his crimes were dangerous. Does this facility need more blood on their hands? Will you ever have clear and convincing evidence Mr. McFarland is no longer dangerous?
In a rare move, the county attorney's office accused the Arizona State Hospital of copying and pasting reports to try and release patients.
Look at the report that was written in August of 2020, and you review the report that was written in April of 2021, there's very little difference. The first section is exactly the same. The second section is exactly the same. The third section is exactly the same. The fourth section is exactly the same. The fifth section fails to address, it is different, fails to address any of the issues that were brought out in the last hearing.
According to meeting minutes, the hospital had put McFarland up for release just 6 months earlier. The board found he was not well enough to be let out, but they were back before the board making virtually the same case.
How is it possible that an individual that committed his offense the end of 2010 spent 10 years without any improvement, well, with the limited improvements that he had as of last September, and then now all of a sudden is miraculously all better? That is not believable.
I don't think the state hospital is doing a good enough job evaluating people. We've been to enough hearings now that it's all the same. Every patient, you know, they're doing great on their meds, they're going to meetings. Something's wrong there.
The closest the PSRB gets to oversight is the State Auditor General, and the PSRB has been audited before, in 2018.
I think the board members do good work, make reasoned decisions, and are very careful to make sure that the public is kept safe and protected.
The Auditor General found the board was making decisions with inconsistent data. It also found the board didn't get detailed mental health reports, which made it hard for the board to make timely and consistent decisions, all of which the board says it fixed.
They seemed not to appreciate that maybe a group of 5 people were going to make mistakes if they didn't tighten up the way they were running the organization. Most of us would say, oh my gosh, give me that list. We're going to fix this tomorrow. The PSRB seemed to be insulted.
Giesel says when patients are approved or denied, there's no reason given, at least not in writing. She says that means she can't tell her clients what they need to work on.
I think at bottom, it is a desire to be completely opaque, completely non-transparent, and to never be accountable for the reasons that you made a decision. And when you have no oversight, that's what you can do. You can say, oh, I don't have to tell you why, either because I don't want to, or because it's too hard, or because, as I think, they don't know. It's the Ouija board.
McFarland's lawyer disputed the criticisms of the hospital's plan. She said the parts of McFarland's reports that were identical were things that never changed from meeting to meeting.
I would move that the PSRB deny conditional release for Mr. McFarland.
The board took another unusual step, telling the state hospital not to bring McFarland back to them for another year.
We need to make changes. That was my first reaction, is that this happened. It can happen again, because I know somebody who killed 2 people that's on the same trajectory to be released to the public. This needs to change.
And it will change. A bill passed in June dissolves the PSRB in 2023. Now, courts will make decisions about which patients are let out and under what conditions. That will change the process for Adam Cooley's family, but it doesn't necessarily change the fact that McFarland could still be let out eventually.
And I didn't realize that we live in a world where we could go and murder people and only give a partial amount of our life.
The case they thought was over isn't really over, and won't be, as McFarland's case will still come up for consideration, bringing up memories of Adam.
I want to remember I'm drinking an ice cold Budweiser.
And the pain of losing him.